Some of my friends have told me acorns are all but gone where they hunt, and that's certainly true here at the proving grounds too. One way is walking through the woods or hunting, but another way is our multi-mobiles are picking up a lot more turkeys out in the food plots. That's always a sign that the acorn crop is almost totally consumed or rotted or whatever. Acorns, of course, are not only an attraction there, they're an important food source in a lot of areas because they're full of carbohydrates. And of course, carbohydrates can develop fat, and deer consuming acorns can pack a lot of fat on this time of year, or even earlier. Acorns started falling in some areas, September, October. So those acorns are a natural way for deer to put a lot of carbohydrates on in areas like this where there's no corn, nor commercial corn crops for miles and miles and miles. You're trying to not just attract deer for hunting, but also increase the herd's nutritional quality, their overall health. Food plots can be a big factor. And going into, here we are in December, I like my food plots, if it's possible, to have green. Everyone's got the wheat, rye, oats, clovers, turnips, whatever. I use blends from green cover, but also grain. Now, we don't plant grain in the fall. You're not planting grain in August or September and it develops a grain seed head by this time of the hunting season. So what you're seeing here is we had green cover's browse pressure release blend planted throughout the summer. And it grew well, and that included milo, which is a grain and very drought resistant, easier to grow than corn, and then a lot of other things. And the deer consumed some of that. And then we did a special technique in this food plot doing some experimenting. It got really dry here in August. It was a dry summer and dry in August, so we used prescribed fire to burn off what was left of the forage crop and any weeds that are developed in our food plot, because this is a relatively small plot and deer ate the forage down. So we used prescribed fire rather than a herbicide, and then drilled in the fall release blend. If you look closely at the milo, you'll notice there's a lot with multi-stems. Well, milo almost always grows with one stem, but that fire, and I'd not done this before, so this was new to me, the fire girdled that milo at ground level, almost like using a prescribed fire to hopefully kill hardwood saplings or at least set them back. The fire obviously girdled the milo. The stems were still standing, some of them were. But driving by a week or two later, I was shocked. We got a little rain, and that milo's putting up new stems just like a hardwood sapling putting up new sprouts if you damage the top. You've done this. You've cut off a tree, maybe making a shooting lane or something. You come back next year, and it's 15 sprouts coming back up. Well, all this milo is multi-stem because that prescribed fire girdled it at ground level, and it made seed heads. It had already made a seed head, and deer had consumed that once, and then it made seed heads again, and now that most of the acorns are gone, deer are in here eating seed heads. I got 2 grain crops for the price of 1. I am not saying this technique will work every year, every time with milo. I've only done it once, but I kind of like what I'm seeing. This plot, of course, had been used the release process for many years with no herbicide, and there was some grass and, a few weeds here and there, and that prescribed fire, it slicked it off pretty doggone good. It was really dry that day and a little windy, and the milo come back out. Milo's got a huge root system, and it come back out, and I'm seeing and videoing deer in here now eating the seed heads. If you got closer to the ground, that green cover fall browse pressure release, it's got, cereal rye and oats and lots of clovers, Nebraskas, deer eating that too. So the result of this was I got that ideal food plot crop. I have green, deer tend to eat on warmer days, and grain, which they eat on the cooler days. I didn't disturb the soil, I didn't disc, I didn't use any fertilizer or herbicide. I call this a huge success.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, Moultrie Mobile, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Ward Laboratories, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
There's still some season left here in Missouri, and we plan to take a few more does. We've taken about 15 so far. My goal is 20 for this year, about 2 does per 100 acres. That's not based on some magic recipe, and it may not work for your property. For us, we harvested a few less last year, and noticed by January, February, that crunch time for deer, our food plots were pretty short. That's an important thing you need to be doing right now, is go out and evaluate your food plots and say, do I have more groceries than I'm gonna need to get deer through the whole winter, or my food plot's already lip high and I need to remove some more mouths while season's still open. We plan to take about 5 more does, and we're gonna make that a big priority. I'm pretty confident we get that accomplished. And what do you need to do? You need to ask yourself, based on boots on the ground data, or maybe you got trail cameras sending you pictures, how tall are my food plots? Now, one way to really evaluate this well is use a utilization cage, just some kind of wire about 12 feet long, make about a 4 feet round cylinder, stake that to the ground, because deer will knock it out of the way, and see how tall the vegetation is inside that utilization cage versus outside. I'm getting a lot of pictures from folks we help with hunting and habitat improvement plans now, and some of them need to harvest more does. You know who I'm talking about out there, because inside their utilization cages is pretty doggone tall. But if they were just looking at outside, they would blame the seed or blame me or somebody and think they had a food plot failure. I'm a huge fan of using utilization cages in every food plot, hidey-ho, big feeding plot, whatever. I mean, I almost think it ought to be a rule. If you're going to build a food plot, you ought to have a utilization cage in there. But when we're working throughout the whitetails range, we see a lot of people that don't even know what they are. Here's an example. This, of course, is milo. You can see deer have removed the grain off a couple of the stems here. Not off this one yet, but they browsed this one really heavy in this one. But look how tall the cereal rye is. Give it a scale here. Here's a size 11 boot, so taller than that, probably over a foot tall. And right outside, deer didn't want to get their head down in here and eat. You can see how thick it is in there. Look at that. That probably be consumed nuts. Look how tall this is in there. And look right here. You can see clover coming on real thick. A lot of clover in here. This is all squared off. You can see all the squared off, browsed off tips in here. And then again here where this was covered. So that's how much deer have consumed. I'm going to say they've consumed 4/5 of the crop that grew. They've consumed 80% of the forage that was grown. And this is what we have now. We still have, food. Deer are still feeding in it on these warmer afternoons in the grove. But this is how tall, there's no difference in soil or rain or sunlight between there and here. Look at how tall this is compared to this. Really think about how tall that vegetation was on my boot, in the milo stalks versus just a couple inches away. And then think, well, we've got all of January, all of February, probably a good bit of March here where we are at the proving grounds too, that deer aren't going to have acorns or much native vegetation. Now, they will survive that just fine, but when deer get in really bad condition or lower their body condition that much going through the winter, they have to regain that before they can use energy to, produce antlers or make more fawns. So the better health deer, instead of dropping way off at that winter stress period, if you can keep that deer herd health level or even slightly increasing, you have much healthier deer, which again make more fawns and larger antlers the following year. So another thing I want to do is make sure I got plenty of growth coming on, because this spring I want the cereal grain, cereal rye, whatnot, to be chest tall on me and the clover just lush down in there. I want to capture all the sun so it's not reaching the soil. I want it, growing and making deer food. And then I'll drag the drill right through there. That's called planting green. Then we'll follow up with the crimper, lay that down, and that once again is two things: our weed protection and our next fertilizer for the next crop. You think about that fertilizer, you crimp down, 5-6 foot tall, heavy vegetation, you end up with about 4-inch mat all across your food plot. If it doesn't rain, well, just like straw on the kitchen table, if it's not moist, it won't break down. If it rains a little, it decomposes a little. Rains medium, it decomposes middle. You get the trend. Well, that's releasing fertilizer as it decomposes nutrients for other plants to grow, the new crop coming on. And it's the world's best slow-release fertilizer. We used to call this the buffalo system, and buffalo would trample down vegetation that they didn't consume. And that, too, was the world's best fertilizer. And they would urinate, defecate, salivate as it moved across the prairie. And that's what built, 15 feet deep topsoil, the best soil on the planet. was that natural system. Well, we can replicate that right here in the food plot. We call that the release process. We'll probably hunt here again, maybe even show you some hunts out here in the future as we work on tagging some more does. But I am thrilled at how this grew back and provided me a second grain crop. I'm not saying it happened every time. It's the first time I've experienced it. I had Keith Burns here a while back, and he had never seen this either. So I'm real excited about this. We may be using this technique in the future, but it's got to be dry enough at the right time of year for your food plot to carry a fire. Certainly all the green out here now would not carry a fire. It just worked out. We had a really dry August, and it worked out perfectly. So maybe that's a technique to put in your back pocket and use it when the situation needs it and the conditions allow. With all that food plot talk, don't forget, I'm a hunter first and foremost, and with the acorns almost gone, deer getting back on these food cover patterns. We're past the peak of the rut. We certainly got a few does still receptive, and our female fawns, because we have quality food here, are pretty big, and we're certainly getting pictures or seeing when we're out hunting bucks kind of trotting on behind those big female fawns. So got some good hunting to go, but when you have good quality groceries like this and the acorns crop is waning, you know where deer are coming to feed every day. They're not eating on a lot of native vegetation right now because that's starting to harden off. And food plots can be key to late season deer hunting success and putting more venison in your freezer. Daniel and I are headed to Alabama tomorrow to help a couple more landowners with a habitat and hunting improvement plan. Hopefully we can share a few tips from what we see on their property and share with them. But while y'all are out spending your week, make sure and take some time to enjoy creation, but more importantly, seek the Creator's will for you and apply it to your life daily. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.